Welcome back. It's another JLU build, and this time again we're starting with a yellow body, which really doesn't matter because as always it's going to get replaced with a clear body painted an undisclosed color at this point. But this build is going to be kind of a hodgepodge of some new parts, some existing parts I had, some parts I kind of was forced to get. So anyways, I'll take you through kind of the stage one. So I pulled off this Surpass motor 12-tooth pinion gammy mount from my Nightcrawler build. So this is brand new, really hasn't been run. It just was installed on that and then I swapped to the Komodo. So that's there. I've got this hot racing spur gear that I've had to go with it. I've got a new Lizard here, which was kind of a forced purchase. I picked up the new Mofo RC Nano Beast micro brushless motor, and it was sold out when I got to it, and he only had it packaged with the Lizard, so I kind of was forced to get a Lizard with it to get it. So since I was going to use a different AC with that, I just had this spare Lizard now, so it works perfect. Picked up a receiver for it. Emax I've had, again another, kind of, not really forced, but you could only get these axles in a 2-package front and rear. So I've got 2 brass axles from Mofo RC. I think I may just use the front housing. And then I've got his brass servo tray that I've got fitted on there, just to make sure I could get it on there. It's super tight fit, took a lot of effort to get it to seat over those ears. I think it's the brass with the black coating, and both of those have it. But that's going to be a nice weighty front piece. Treal overdrive gears. Picked up some extra, metal gears when I picked up some other ones that were super cheap. And then some Injora parts. When you order from Injora, you really order from Injora because they're very affordable and it takes about a month, at least for me, to get parts from them. So I picked up some high clearance links, some matching gray steering links, trans skid, and then I'm going to try out, I believe these are 40mm mountain shocks from Injora. So all of these parts I've had sitting for quite a while, so those Injora mountain shocks I don't think are new anymore. I've seen quite a few people running them, but they'll be new to me. And then I picked up the more affordable Injora inner fender set, which actually comes with the rock sliders. So that is super affordable versus CC hand, and you have to buy the rock sliders for an additional like $7 on top of the fenders. So hopefully those will be just the same. They look like it from cursory inspection. So this is basically your stage one. This should get me up and rolling, and the goal is to test fit some new wheels and tires that I picked up, look at some options, look at what I may or may not have to do as far as fender trimming. So we'll see. Alright, got the motor transmission assembly mounted in, and the gunmetal looks really good. I clocked the wires down, let's squeeze in right there. Routed under the battery tray to set up for that side for the receiver ESC. You can see I've got a little clearance at the frame, not a lot, but a little there at the motor. So I may clearance that out a little more with a Dremel, but that's fairly typical. Let's see, this drive shaft's kind of in the way there. There you can see it's close. So you may or may not have to do that, and then I'm going to have to remove this rear leg of the ESC tray, kind of cut an L shape around that motor, but that's all going smooth. So I've got shocks and links here to take a look at, so let's take a look at these. Okay, here's a close view of these links. These guys are pretty nice looking. They've got the beveled edge like the Treal and Hot Racing. But it's not machined. These are fully coated on that bevel, so that's kind of cool. Got the gunmetal again, and they come with the flange style ball stud, which is not really an issue on the links because they're all double captured, I guess, except for the rear uppers are not. So I guess it comes into play there. And the shocks, they look good, they feel good. They've got the flange style, so that flange will go to the outside on these. And then they've got a gold hard spring and a silver medium, and then I believe it's a black one installed, but that's the soft one installed. So I'm going to get all these micro O-rings on, which is always my favorite thing to do. And then we'll start hanging links, and then probably jump into this front axle, switch all that housing out, and gears. That's basically going to be a full rebuild there. So moving right along. Got a little progress here on the chassis. So you can see I've got all my links hung. I went ahead and dremeled out the ESC tray, and I clearanced the frame right there by the motor edge. You can see that little cutout. Got the back axle on, shocks. These shocks are definitely longer. They have the same shaft length, but they don't fully compress, so they don't actually have as much extension as the OEM shocks here. They've got the same shaft length, but they'll fully compress. But you can definitely see the height difference. So these may end up getting leaned forward to adjust the ride height down a little. We'll see. But other than that, little quirk here on the links. You can see the printing. It's not symmetrical, so you don't see it on this side on the fronts, and then on the rear you don't see it on the other side. But other than that, you know, not really a big deal, just kind of a funny little Injora thing. The front links, same flange side, ball studs as the other stuff. And then you can see I've got the front axle going together, and the Mofo cover and the Mofo brass axle all fit together nicely. The bearings seated great. No fitment issues at all. Everything is great there. And like I said, the brass servo tray, you are going to have to kind of put some effort into seating it onto this brass axle. And then the NZ Hobbies knuckles would not fit on the brass axle, so I opted to Dremel the knuckles since they're the cheaper piece. So you can see there, I just took a cutoff wheel and kind of sanded the inside edge on the top and bottom there. So now these are rotating nicely on the kingpin. So I've still got to Dremel this one. You can see it's still black coated on the inside. But that should basically wrap up the chassis, and maybe we can look at some wheels and tires. Alright, got this front end in, and a couple notes here. Again on this brass axle. And it may just be with these Injora links, but these, you know, brass ball studs were super tight in getting those in. So I basically had to take the link off so I could align these straight, and you know, I kind of had to get a fingernail on each side and just go in super even. They didn't scrape the coating or anything off, but they're a snug fit. But didn't have to Dremel or sand anything on that. But then the frame, you know, I had the shocks off, and I was compressing this and getting the servo way up in the frame. So I went ahead and clearanced out the bottom of the channel on each side. You can see right there, basically just to let that servo block, make sure it gets clearance. And right now the shocks are actually stopping it, so it's not an issue. But if I lean these or do something different and somehow get more compression, I just wanted to make sure I had clearance. So that's fairly typical to run into some issue right there. But one other thing I forgot to mention too is for all the shocks, the top mounts at the, I guess not the frame, but you know, at the chassis, I used one of these little black plastic spacers. A lot of times I'll use aluminum spacers, but Mofo has been throwing in these spacers with the servo kits, and I haven't used any, so I've got a bunch of these on hand. Just a little plastic washer, like 1.5 mm, 2 mm wide. So that worked out well to kind of get these shock bodies. They're fairly thick, get those spaced off a little bit. But looks like the frame chassis is all good and functional. So I think I'm going to put the fenders on. So I went ahead and got these Injora out to look at them. They're definitely a different plastic. They're real shiny and slick versus the CC hand. And you know, they come with the rock rails. They come with this kind of flat style, and there's just a through hole where the CC hand actually have a lip. So the CC hand you can actually screw up, and the screw can recess in there and hold these from the bottom, or you can mount them over the pegs on the inside. And all of mine, I think I've mounted from the bottom, but you really don't have that option here. So I'm going to try them and see. You can see they sit up a little bit higher, but they have a little kind of a lip for the body to sit in. So we'll see how these work. They're definitely a lot cheaper than the CC hand fenders. So the key thing is they still have the headlight bucket recess. I've seen a lot of 3D printed ones or just kind of cheaper knockoffs that don't have that. So since I'm always putting in headlight LEDs, I want that recess there. So I get those on, and then maybe we can get wheels and tires onto this thing. Got the fenders on, no fitment issues. That'll give me a lot of places to mount electronics. The fitment issue was, not really a fitment issue, but the body wouldn't close if these are mounted from the top over these pegs that are in here. And then these screws have a little washer kind of built into the head. And so if you screw them from the bottom, you know, of course they catch on the outer edge here. So there's only like 2 mm of engagement through that peg. So I'm not going to use these. Luckily I did have some CC hand that I bought a while back on hand, and I was wrong. They're $9, not $7. So expensive little boogers, but I'll show you kind of the difference here in how these mount. Try to get them out. So these have a recess. Let's see. You can kind of see it there. So you can actually mount these, you know, with the peg in that recess from the top, or you can mount these from the bottom and the screw will recess up in there, and it'll still grab that lip. So you can mount these from the bottom with a nice recess screw, or you mount them from the top over the peg. And of course you see how much smaller these screws are, so they'll recess in the hole. So I'm going to try to mount these to these Injora fenders from the bottom, and that should allow the body shell to fully close. That worked out nicely, and you can see how much higher those Injora are sitting on top. So I mean, that's like 4 or 5 millimeters. So you can see why that body shell wouldn't close. I would have had to, you know, put a body lift on there. So that's where I typically mount them, from underneath, and then the screws recess up in there nicely. So a shot of them here side by side. So you can see that even the mount blocks are thicker on the Injora. This is just thinner overall. You can see kind of the difference in plastic. But I'm going to get the other one on. These are looking good. Okay, got the sliders on, both sides, inner fenders in, and put the body on, and wheels, tires, just to get a quick glance here, mock-up. And wow, sitting super tall. So it's part of the problem with these 40 millimeter shocks is you don't really have that ability to rotate them down to the frame mount points. If you do that, which I took a look at that, because typically that'll give you some more articulation, But with these 40 millimeters, that's actually raising the body up even higher. That's not what I want to do. So these are in the stock position, and like I said earlier, there's not a lot of throw. So there's a couple solutions. I could use new shocks. I could look at widening the track for more articulation and or some flex blades, but that's still not going to give me any up travel. It'll give me more down travel and more, flex, but it won't give me any more compression. It's not going to lower the ride height. Luckily the mail came yesterday and I got a couple of choices here, some NHX axle extensions, so +4 with the patty weights, and it comes with the spacers, and I believe these are +6s, and these have the big heavy hex brake disc type, which I don't think I'll need these weights with this brass front end. It is so heavy right now, but it gives you the option to weight or not weight. You can put the sleeves on there. So I've got some options to widen the track a little, which I think I'm going to do for sure because this is so narrow. But I think the last thing before I look at wheels and tires is go ahead and get this bumper on, which is a gunmetal gray Treal to match kind of all the gunmetal underpinnings that we've done so far. So I want to get that bumper on there, make sure I don't have any trimming to do on the bottom of the grill, see if I want to raise that up, just how that'll work with the servo. Maybe I can get rid of this drop down like I usually do. So I want to figure all that out before I start on the clear body. I also got some wheels in the mail, some NHX gunmetal gray with brass rings. So those are a possibility. I also ordered up some new Treal wheels. So I've got their gunmetal gray with the black beadlock ring, and these also have brass internal rings. And then since I can't make up my mind, I got the brass or bronze center with the black beadlock ring, and these have a brass inner ring as well for weight. So I've got some options there, and then I ordered up, like I said, from Injora, and so I've got several tire options here that we may look at. I was looking at doing this as a kind of a more aggressive trail, but not super aggressive crawler. So Injora's got these nice Nito trail grapplers, which are what's on there, but these are actually wider and they feel much better. And these are Injora basically pit bull growlers, looks like, from the tread pattern, and these have a nice feel. And neither one of these Injora tires I could get to seal. I mean, they're in there, they're on the bead. They have a thicker, I guess, bead than RC four-wheel drive, so they were a little harder to mount on these Treal. But as you can see, they're not holding air. They do have foams, so really nice and soft. And then this is the other one. This is a bogger, Super Swamper bogger from Injora, and I actually got this one to hold air, as you can see, but it's also super soft. It's got its foam in there. These are all sold by Injora packaging, but this one says All-Star Hobby, and who knows what these are really called. This is like extreme mud terrain. I think this is crawler tire mud terrains, but I just call them by whatever tread pattern they're mimicking. So grappler, growler, bogger. Don't think these are going to go on there. These are more like the size of the mudslingers or the scramblers. Even if they do go on there, I'm still going to drop this ride height. But I'm leaning towards these growlers. They're really soft and wide, but my goal is to have several sets of rims and tires on hand to just easily swap between vehicles to do some tire testing and switch some things out. So that's kind of the plan. So I'm going to get this bumper on, and then we may look at putting in those axle extensions, one of those sets, and then putting on some wheels and tires to get a look at this thing. All right, looks like the bumper is going to work. I will have to potentially trim that bottom of the front grille, but I took off the drop down brackets, so it comes straight out, and you can see there it's sitting on the bars, and I've got it in the furthest outward position. And the peg's not coming through, but I'm going to have magnets, 2 layers of magnets there, so that's going to lift it up. So I think, if anything, I may just have to do like a 2mm body lift on the back mounts to raise it. You can see the body's sitting a little bit nose high if you look at that slider, but that's all post paint, easy trimming when I actually fit the new body on there. So I think that'll work. And you can see with it off, it'll seat, and you can see the peg coming through there. So I got out these wheels and axles to kind of take a look at this, and comparing these fronts to the listed +4 fronts, they're the same length, so they're both +4s. This just has the heavier hex, and all of the depth goes to the back, so you don't need a thicker like +5 or 6 axle. It's behind the hex, and it seats out wide. So I basically got these out to see if they're going to fit with both of these wheels. I know they'll fit with Treal, because Treal has no screws in there and nothing protrudes past the hub, those screws, so it's all flush. So that seats in there just perfectly nice. You could add more weight if desired. So I looked at it with these wheels, which are really quite pretty, really nice. They come with a brass lock cap, which is fairly ugly. I'm not going to use it. I mean, it's not a lock, it's just a flange nut, so it's not a lock nut, but it is brass, but it doesn't look very good with gunmetal. So anyways, I got these. I wanted to make sure these would fit in this room, and they basically will almost full engagement. You can see there's one screw in here, if this will focus. So that outer screw flange is flush with the inner hub, so that's all good, but then you can see that the, if it'll focus again, the screw head sticks up maybe 1.5 millimeters. Past that, it's not a flush mount screw. So when you insert these, you can see it's sitting a little crooked because one side's hitting that, barely hitting that screw, just barely catching it. So you could shave that lip off with a Dremel, or when they're all in there, you're just going to have a little more width and probably 1 millimeter that it's not fully seated. So that's just something to know with this type of weight that comes out over the hex. That's why I really like these, because these are patty weights that sit behind the hex, so they don't interfere with wheels such as these RC 4-wheel drive that have the big cylinder there. So in these type, you can't, there's no way to even fit these in. A lot of the Power Hobby knockoff rims don't have recesses for the screws, so they don't sit flush. So those won't work. Power Hobby wheels are all flush, so these do seat in there nicely. But just something to know when you're looking at wheels and you start thinking about weights, make sure they're compatible. Because if you've got a bunch of screw heads in here, sometimes these won't even fit. So just something to know. So I think I'm going to mount up one side with Treal and then one side with these rims. I mean, not that we can get much of a comparison yet, because everything looks pretty bad with this yellow body, all this gray, none of it really goes together, so it's not a true anything, but I can get the wide stance, get the wheels in there, and basically get a stopping point and figure out what I'm going to do about the shocks, and then the next episode will be body. Quick note here on these axles, so there is a difference. They're both +4, but I was like, hey, there's no option to put a patty weight behind that pin on these. So if you look at these +4s, which are typical with the patty weights, you can see the pinhole right there is close to the outer edge. And then you see how far back the pinhole is here from the outer edge. So you really don't have any option on these except to run these that they actually push the hex way out. So if these seat on the pin, they'll sit back here, and you've got your normal thread extension, so you can mount a wheel. But if you tried to run these just with a typical hex, put the hex on here, and if I slid it back to where the pin is, you couldn't mount a wheel. Your wheel would sit way too far in, and your thread would be sticking out way too far. So just FYI on these Nitro Hobbies weights, you're going to have to use the weights all the way around. Whereas these +4s with the patties, you have the option to use a collar or a weight. So just something to know here. These are a little unique. I haven't used axles like this, so surprise to me. So I guess I'll be running weights all the way around in these wheels. All right, got the +4 axles in. The front axles, I went ahead and took a Dremel cutoff wheel to deepen those drive cup slots. I'll show a photo of that, but they were too shallow, as typical with all the +4 axles or any extended axles I've used. I've had to do that. But you also notice it's sitting lower. I moved the top shock mounting point up to the body posts. So that, I moved it from the shock mount screw up on both front and rear. So that's given me maybe 3 or 4 more millimeters dropped. So that's got the ride height a little more in check. And the +4 axles have given me at least a tire height more flex. I had just over a tire before, so much better there. But you can see the wide stance here. One thing in doing that relocation of the shocks, it allowed me more down travel into the frame zone here, and you can see that cross brace. I've cut out the middle so that servo horn can clear. And I've had to, before I've taken a little bit out of that cross brace, but I've never cut out the whole center section. But with that metal bumper installed, that acts as the cross brace, so not a big deal at all. But I've got the bumper off now just so I can get the body shell fully closed down, and you can, actually see the ride height. And of course, the rear tires are a little bit bigger, these growlers, a little bit taller than the Treal grapplers. And I was able to get these to seal on each wheel, but on both of them I had to back off the back rim, on each of them, and kind of pull the bead a little, and then re-screw them down, and then that sealed them. So anyways, that's where it sits right now. I think that's a good stopping point, and I think all the body work to come, then I'll get the electronics in, the lighting, LEDs, and hopefully make some kind of decision on wheels and tires, or maybe no decision, just have a wild to mild to extreme set of tires for this guy. So I think this is where we stop for stage 1, so thanks for coming along and stay tuned.